Welcome back. This is part 5 of chapter 1, Becoming Supernatural with Dr. Joe Dispenza. Welcome. Um, let's get right into it. Can you live a past life in real time? Dr. Joe did. So, this part of chapter 1 challenges everything we think we know about time and identity. Yeah. What if you could remember a life you never lived, down to the smells, sights, and sounds? In part 5 of chapter 1, Dr. Joe relives a past incarnation, and what it taught him was actually really profound. By the way, I also did a video on my channel. I did a two-part video where I talked about Kendrick Lamar and his song Reincarnated, where he sampled Tupac's song, but he talked about past life regression. If you're interested in that, that's linked below in this video, because the topic is similar and I'm fascinated by it. But here we go. Living a past incarnation in the present moment. One morning, about an hour and a half after I started my meditation in a seated position, I finally reclined. I put some pillows under my knees so I wouldn't fall asleep too quickly, allowing me to linger between wakefulness and sleep. As I lay down, I simply put my attention in the place the pineal gland occupies in my head. But this time, instead of trying to make something happen, I just let go and said to myself, whatever. Apparently, that was the magic word. Right. I know what that means now. I surrendered. I got out of the way, let go of any specific outcome, and simply opened up to possibility. Something about that surrender, y'all. The next thing I knew, I was experiencing myself as a stout man in a very hot region of the world that seemed to be in what we now call Greece or Turkey. The terrain was rocky, the ground was parched, and the stone buildings, like those in the Greco-Roman times, were interpersed with many small tents made of brightly colored fabrics. I was wearing a one piece skirted burlap garment that fell from my shoulders to my mid thighs, and I had a thick rope tied around my waist like a belt. I wore sandals roped up to my calves. I had thick curly hair, and my body felt strong. My shoulders were broad, and my arms and legs were muscular. I was a philosopher and a longtime student of some charismatic movement. I was simultaneously the self in that experience and my present self observing me in that particular time and space. Again, I was way more conscious than normal. I was super conscious. All my senses were heightened and I was very aware of everything. I could smell the familiar musk of my body and I could taste the salt of my perspiration dripping from my face. I loved that taste. I felt grounded in the physicality and strength of my body. I was aware of deep pain in my right shoulder, but it did not consume my attention. I saw the brightness of the blue sky and the richness of the green trees and mountains as if I were living in technicolor. I heard seagulls in the distance and I knew I was near a large body of water. I was on a pilgrimage and a mission of sorts. I was traveling about the country teaching the philosophy that I had studied and lived by my whole life. I was under the tutelage of a grand master whom I loved very deeply because of the care, patience, and wisdom he had given me for so many years. It was my time now to be initiated and to deliver a message to change the minds and hearts of the culture. I knew that the message I was disseminating was counter to the current beliefs of that time and that the government and religious orders of the day would challenge me, as it would be so with, you know. The main message of the philosophy I studied would free people from living in any type of obligation to do something or someone outside of them. Let me reread that because my eyes is getting crossed. The main message of the philosophy I had studied would free people from living in any type of obligation to something or someone outside of them. It would also inspire individuals to demonstrate a code of principles that would empower them to have more enriched and meaningful lives. I was passionate about this idealism, and I worked daily to live in alignment with the doctrines Of course, the message would omit the need for religion and for any dependence on government, and it would free people from personal pain and suffering. Ooh, imagine a philosophy that gets you to not have to need religion. Interesting. And not get you to need to depend on a government. Very interesting. And it just speaks to what we know religion really is, in a sense of how it, and this is a whole debate that could take place on the internet and everywhere else, but how religion was used to keep people in the masses under control and dependent on their governments. Yeah. As the scene came to life, I had just finished addressing a crowd in a relatively populated village. The gathering was just breaking up when suddenly several men quickly moved through the masses to arrest me. Before I could even try to escape, I was seized. I knew that they had planned their strategy well. If they had begun to move about while I had been walking to the crowd, I would have spotted them. They timed it perfectly. I surrendered without resistance, and they took me to a prison cell where I was left alone. Locked in a small stone cube with narrow slits for windows, I sat there knowing my destiny. Nothing I could do could prepare me for what was about to happen. Within 2 days, I was taken to the center of the city where hundreds of people gathered, many of them the same people who had listened to me speak just a few days earlier. But now, they eagerly anticipated the chance to watch my trial and impending torture. I was stripped to a small cloth undergarment and then strapped to a large horizontal stone slab where the large grooves notched into corners through which the ropes slid. The ropes had metal cuffs on the ends that were fastened to my wrists and ankles. Then it began. A man standing to my left started to crank a lever and move the slab slowly from the horizontal position forward to a more vertical position. As the stone block moved upward, the ropes pulled my limbs tighter in all four directions. Ooh, that sounds crazy. It's giving Christ and the story of his crucifixion. When I made it to about 45 degrees, the real pain began. Someone who seemed to be a magistrate yelled out, asking me if I would continue teaching my philosophy. I did not look up to answer. He then ordered the man to crank the lever further. At a certain point, I started to hear the audience audible noises and pops, evidence of my spine dislocating in certain areas. Ooh. As the observer of this scene, I watched the look on my face as the pain increased. It was like looking into a mirror and seeing myself. I became acutely aware that it was me on the slab. The metal cuffs around my wrists and ankles now tore into my skin, and the sharp metal burned. I was bleeding. One of my shoulders dislocated, and I heaved and grunted in pain. My body was convulsing and shaking as I tried to resist the tearing of my limbs by flexing and holding my muscles tight in resistance. Letting go would have been unbearable. Suddenly, the magistrate hollered out again, asking me if I would continue to teach. I had a thought. I will agree to stop teaching, and then when they let me down from this public display of torture, I will simply start again. I reasoned that this was the right answer. It would appease the magistrate and stop the pain and my death while enabling me to continue my mission. I slowly shook my head from side to side in silence. He said, "No, anyway, y'all." Then the magistrate pressed me to verbally say no, but I would not speak. He then motioned quickly to the tormentor on my left to push the crank even harder. I looked down at the man as he turned the gears with a clear intention to hurt me. I saw his face, and as we looked into each other's eyes, I, as the observer, instantly recognized this person as someone in my present life as Joe Dispenza. The same person, but in a different body. Something clicked within me as I witnessed this scene. I recognized that this tormentor is still tormenting others, including me, in my current incarnation. And I understood that person's role in my life. It was an oddly familiar feeling of knowing, and it all made perfect sense. Y'all imagine the characters in your current life You're like living in a totally different identity, but the same characters are existing in those infinite realities. Have you guys ever saw that movie Everything Everywhere All at Once? If you have not, it speaks to this very notion, and the characters in the that movie live infinite realities. It's so fascinating. But anyways, check it out. I lost my place. Okay. As the slab accelerated upward, my lower back snapped and my body started to lose control. That was the moment that broke me. I wept from the blinding pain, and I also felt such a deep sadness consume my being. When the weight of the heavy stone was released, it fell quickly back to the horizontal position. I lay there, quivering uncontrollably in silence. I was then dragged back to the small prison cell where I lay curled up in the corner. For 3 days, I could not stop the flashbacks of my torture. Humans are so freaking cruel, man. Ugh. I was so humiliated that I never could speak in public again. The very thought of returning to my mission created such a visceral response in my body that I stopped even thinking about it. One night, they released me, and without being noticed, head down in utter shame, I disappeared. I was unable to look anyone in the eye ever again. I felt like I had failed in my mission. I spent the rest of my life in a cave by the sea, trapping fish and living in silence as a hermit. Yeah. As I witnessed this poor man's plight and his choice to hide from the world, I understood that this was a message for me. I knew that in my present life, I could not disappear and hide from the world again, and that my soul wanted me to see that I had to continue my work. I had to make the effort to stand up for a message and never again retract from adversity. I also recognized that I hadn't failed at all. I had done my best. I knew that young philosopher still lived in the eternal present moment as a myriad of possible me's, and that I could change my future and his by never again being afraid to live for the truth instead of dying for it. Each of us has a myriad possible incarnations that exist in the eternal present moment, all waiting to be discovered. When the mystery of the self is unveiled, we can wake up to the understanding that we are not linear beings living a linear life, but instead dimensional beings living dimensional lives. The beauty behind the infinite possibilities that await us is that the only way we can change those futures is to change ourselves in the present infinite moment. That was a lot. That was a lot. It's fascinating because he talks about how the infinite realities, the parallel lives that we're living, are accessible through consciousness, right? And he keeps this pattern going about how he drifts into these experiences of transcendental moments. And it's usually like what Neville talks about. Neville Goddard talks about a state akin to sleep. Excuse me. A state akin to sleep where he's in a meditative state. He slowed down his brain waves into alpha and theta states to get there. And that's where the door of infinite possibilities exists. And then he finds himself slipping into these experiences of vivid realness where it feels real to him. It feels like he's living it, but he also has an awareness that he's also in existence in a different space, which is his present self. This stuff is so fascinating. Like I said, I talked about it in relation to Kendrick Lamar and his reincarnated song that he did because he talks about these lives that he lived. But guys, this isn't just about the past. It's about how much more we are than just what we've been told, right? We've heard stories of people talking about, you know, past life regression. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. Maybe this is your first time, but I have looked into a significant amount of stories just because I find it fascinating. And I remember growing up where I would spend a lot of time with my grandmother. And for whatever reason, her and her girlfriends thought that I was like super mature and wise for my age. And they would say things like, she's an old soul. And now, like, being in this experience where I am on my journey learning about things like past life regression, it makes a lot of sense that we come to this life with a lot of wisdom and knowingness within us already. Like, if you look at a baby that's born and you look at how it goes from infancy to toddler to, what comes after toddler. I don't know. I don't have children yet, um, but they have their own personalities and they have their own ways of being, and it makes me question, like, that has to come from somewhere, right? At least for me, that's how my brain works as I'm processing these things. But I feel like it comes from somewhere, and we all have an inner knowing. And what he left off saying in this chapter is that the beauty behind the infinite probabilities that await us is that the only way we can change the futures, right, is to change ourselves in the present infinite moment. And that just reminds me that we have an opportunity to learn from the wisdom of our soul. Like, in that past life that he lived when he was in a cage or cave, um, and had been tortured and never returned to his purpose again because of the torture, he still had a profound knowingness that to retreat was not the right answer. Right? Like, and he didn't make himself wrong because he had grace. He said he did the best he understood that. But he also understood in this life, knowing what he knows as a teacher and a philosopher of sorts, that it's not enough to retreat and go back in a cave. Like, he wants to be willing to go to bat about what he's sharing with the world and the research that he and his team and all these people who are becoming supernatural, like me, like you, like all the thousands of testimonials and stories of transformation that are stored on his YouTube channel. Um, he wants us to understand that we can embody this work and not be afraid of whatever, because there's nothing to fear other than your soul's evolution. I don't know. This stuff is real fascinating to me, guys. If this blew your mind like it blew my mind, comment I'm ready to remember below. Comment I'm ready to remember below. And remember, we'll go live this Tuesday at 8 p.m. to talk about all of chapter one. Actually, let me rephrase that. By the time you're watching this, I will have already gone live. So we're going to go live this upcoming Friday to talk about the whole of chapter one. So you can bring your notes, bring your questions, and open hearts. And we are going to continue to learn about what it means to become supernatural. Once again, if you want to be part of my community, simply click the links that I provided below my link tree and grab my newsletter for free. You will also get a free downloadable 7 Thoughts to Unshakable Faith cheat sheet, and it will help you strengthen your faith as you walk this path of becoming supernatural. Yeah, we just getting started, y'all. It's just chapter one, and it gets better. I don't know who needs to hear this, but check me out for chapter two because that's what's coming up next. Stay tuned.